Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. Tonight we are continuing with our series War and Peace in Jewish Tradition. And what we're going to be doing is this week I'm going to almost exclusively learn from the Rambam, Maimonides, on his understanding of Mashiach. And then in the next week or two, we are going to, we'll say, fill in other opinions, other traditions, other ideas about Mashiach. And then we're going to end the mini-series of War and Peace in Jewish Tradition with a whole class about peace. And the reason why learning about Mashiach is connected to war and peace in Jewish tradition is because throughout all of history, as we've discussed, there is just a constant state of warfare in the world, including right now, not just in Israel, all over the Middle East, all over the world. There is conflict and wars and rebellions and revolutions and strife. The culmination of history is the coming of the Mashiach, where the view of reality and the cycle of exile and redemption will, in a certain way, be broken. The paradigm will be broken of constant exile and redemption, exile and redemption, war and peace, war and peace. So learning about Mashiach is, in a way, as we'll see, because the Mashiach fights the final wars, and he's the one who brings the ultimate peace. So just a few words, and then we're going to jump right into the Rambam. I'm hoping to get through the whole thing tonight. And around 40 years ago, the Lubavitcher Rebbe began promoting this idea that because the Messianic era is coming closer and that we have an active part in making it come closer and occur, is he encouraged everyone to be learning about Mashiach, praying about Mashiach, doing acts that would help lead to Mashiach, and especially the first thing, the idea of learning the different traditions of Mashiach in order to ready ourselves and to elevate our longing for Mashiach. And so because of the situation, we have to remember that about 150 years ago, there were a few thousand Jews in Israel. And in the last approximately 150 years, we have seen the prophecies of the approaching Messianic era occur. The ingathering of the exiles, the rebuilding of the cities, sovereignty, our ability to defend ourselves, the land turning green, Yerushalayim becoming the spiritual vortex of the world, once again, as it always was, but it was quite hidden. All of that has occurred and is occurring. And so therefore, the anticipation and longing for Mashiach is at a very, very, very high level at this point. Okay, so again, for those who want to follow, you can go to your chats, go to the link that Ephraim put up there, If not, you could just listen and then look at it later, or just follow along. So as a short introduction, the Rambam's classic work is called the Mishneh Torah. And in it, he arranged all of the laws that have to do with every aspect of Jewish life. And this is approximately 1,000 years ago. And he performed an incredible contribution to Jewish learning. The Mishneh Torah became one of the sources of the Shulchan Aruch, call it the skeleton or the backbone of Jewish law till this day. So much of it is based on the opinions of the Rambam. So at the very end of the Mishneh Torah, there are 14 different sections of the Mishneh Torah. Sometimes it's called the Yad Chazakah, the strong hand. And that's because the word Yad equals 14. And since there are 14 sections, the way he organized Jewish law, so the last part of the Mishneh Torah, the very, very last part, are called the laws of kings. And the last two chapters of the laws of kings, and including the end of the entire Mishneh Torah, is the Rambam's understanding of Mashiach. And so we're going to go through this in English. It's not long, but we're going to have to go at a pretty good pace. Everyone should know two things. One, we will go back over many of these ideas. I might just mention in short something about them, but I think it's very important that we get the whole picture from the Rambam, from beginning to end. And like I said, we will go back over many of these ideas. And the second thing, which is very important, I might point out as we go along, this is the Rambam's opinion. That doesn't mean that there are not other opinions. And it doesn't mean that the Rambam is necessarily the last word of the various traditions about Mashiach. This is true of all of Jewish learning. We know that probably the most important commentator on the Chumash and the Gemara is Rashi. And sometimes people just assume whatever Rashi says, that is what it is. But we have to realize that there are many, many other commentaries, and not everyone agrees with Rashi's understanding of even the simple text, let alone the deeper aspects. So, of course, this is not taking away from Rashi. What would we do without Rashi? But it's the same thing with the Rambam. And here, when we go over these opinions, we have to just keep in mind, and we have to be patient, because in the next coming weeks, we will go over different opinions other than the Rambam's. Okay, so we're going to start. Like I said, I'm going to read at a decent pace. And every once in a while, I'll stop and make some comments. And we're going to get through these two chapters of Rambam. Okay, so he begins. The Messiah will be a king who will restore the kingdom of David to its original state. He will rebuild the temple and gather together all Jews, no matter where they are scattered. So this begins the Rambam's, we'll call it, job description. As he'll make clear later, that if a person comes and claims that they're Mashiach, but does not do what he just said and more, then it simply is not the Mashiach. So here he already says that he will restore the kingdom of David. He will rebuild the temple, and he will gather Jews no matter where they are scattered. All the laws of the Torah will be fulfilled as they were originally. The sacrificial system, as well as the practices of the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, will all be restored. We will then be able to once again observe all the commandments of the Torah. So we have to understand that many mitzvot in the Torah depend on being in Israel, the establishment of the Sanhedrin, and the rebuilding of the temple. Without those three things, a majority of the mitzvah we don't do today, because we don't have a temple, we don't have the Kohanim and the Levim doing the service in the temple, and we don't have a Sanhedrin. And so he mentions, like, for example, the sabbatical year and the Yovel year will again be observed and celebrated. And that's because right now the Sanhedrin has to declare the Shemitah year and the Yovel year. And so we don't have a Sanhedrin. So we do keep a Shemitah year, but it's from the rabbis today. So what the Rambam is saying is, with the rebuilding of the temple and all that includes, we'll be able to do all of the mitzvot again. I will mention just very simply where he says the sacrificial system will be restored. There's debate about this. There's debate exactly what the service in the temple will be with the coming of Mashiach. Again, we are going to go over this in subsequent weeks. Continuing, a person who does not believe in the Mashiach or does not await his coming denies the most essential teachings of the prophets. Beyond that, he also denies the teaching of both Moshe and the Torah. So this, for those who were here at the beginning, so Ephraim saying his version of the 12th principle of faith of Rambam, which is Ani Mamin B'Yemuna Shalema B'Biyat HaMashiach. Ya'af pi sheyitma mea im kol zeh achar kelo b'chol yom sheyavo. I believe with a perfect faith that the Mashiach will come, and even though he may take his time, I will expect his arrival each and every day. The Rambam considers this one of the pillars of faith. And here in the Mishneh Torah, he says, someone who doesn't believe in this is denying the words of all of the prophets, including Moshe, denying the words of the Torah. The Rambam continues, the Torah itself testifies to the Messianic promise when it says, and this is in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 3-5. This is Parshat Nitzavim. Nitzavim is towards the end of the Torah. It's a relatively short parsha, but every word of this parsha is so significant. So the Rambam brings three of the verses, and it says like this. This is a quote from Devarim. God will restore your fortunes, have mercy on you, and gather you again from all the countries where he has scattered you. If he were to banish you to the ends of the heavens, God, your God, will gather you and bring you up from there. God, your God, will bring you to the land of that your fathers occupied, You will occupy it again, and he will make you even more prosperous and numerous than your fathers. That's the quote. Rambam continues, this passage in the Torah includes everything that was predicted by all the prophets regarding the Mashiach. Now you see the name Mashiach is not mentioned, and not even a figure. But what the Rambam is saying, that this prophecy from Moshe, that God will gather us from the four corners of the earth, will bring us back to the land, will make us even more prosperous and numerous than ever before. So the Rambam says this is an explanation of the Messianic era. Rambam continues, in the account of Bilam, we likewise find a prophecy regarding the two messiahs. Okay, I just want to say, I noticed a number of people came on after the beginning. For those who want to follow what I'm reading here, it's in your chats. We included a link that you can open up and follow what we're reading here. Okay? Okay, so I'm continuing. In the account of Bilam, we likewise find a prophecy regarding the two messiahs or anointed ones. So we mentioned this already last week, where Bilam, the pagan prophet who was hired by Balak to curse the Jews, but in the end he blesses the Jews because God would not let him curse the Jews. So in the end, he gives some of the most elevated prophecies of the future. And here the Rambam is quoting Bilam because his prophecies are all about the Messianic era. So now I'm reading from the Rambam, where he says there'll be two Mashiachs. Now, when we hear that, we might think the Rambam is going to talk about Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. But the Rambam means something different here when he says this is a prophecy regarding two Mashiachs. And he explains, the first one was King David, who liberated the Jews from all their initial oppressors. David was called Mashiach Hashem. He was called the anointed of God. And he acted very similar to how Mashiach will act in the end of days. The largest kingdom of Israel that has ever been established was established by David, where he expanded the borders very close to the borders that God promised to Abraham. He established Jerusalem as the everlasting capital of Israel. So Rambam says in the prophecies of Bilam, there's two different Mashiachs being referred to. The first one is David. And he continues, the second is his descendant, the Mashiach, who will liberate all Jews in the end. So now he quotes from Bilam, from Numbers 24:17. So Bilam says, I see him, but not now. So Rambam says, this is talking about King David. This is Bilam giving a prophecy about King David. Bilam says, I behold him, but not near. This is the Mashiach at the end of time. Bilam continues, a star shall come forth from Jacob. This is King David. A scepter shall arise in Israel. This is the Mashiach of the end of days. He shall smite the squadrons of Moab. This is King David, who defeated Moab. So Rambam says, we thus find that in the second book of Shmuel, that David smote Moab and measured them with a rope. In other words, he overtook their whole area. The Rambam continues to quote Bilam, he shall break down the sons of Seth. This is the Mashiach of the future. We thus find that Zechariah said, his rule shall be from sea to sea. In other words, the Mashiach will expand the borders of Israel. Edom shall be his conquest. So the Rambam says this is talking originally about King David. As it's written in the book of Shmuel, all Edom became servants to David. And continuing in Bilam, and Seir, his enemy, shall be his tribute. That is the Mashiach. Who is Seir? Seir is the home of Esav. Esav then becomes Rome. Rome becomes the world of Christianity. And so the Rambam quotes from Obadiah. When it says, in Seir, his enemy shall be his tribute, again, this is from Bilam, predicting that Israel will come to conquer Seir. And so Obadiah says, and we say it every day in our prayers, that saviors shall come up on Mount Zion and judge the mount of Esav, and the kingdom shall be that of God. Balu Mosheim Bahar Seir, Bahar Sion, Lishpot et Har Seir, V'haya Hashem Lamelech HaKol Oretz. So this finishes the Rambam's quoting of Bilam. The point here is, if we go back a little bit, the Rambam says that he wants to establish that not only did all the later prophets prophesy about Mashiach, and you look in all of them, they all prophesied about the final redemption, the end of exile and the final redemption. But this whole quote from Bilam is the Rambam wants to show it's not just from the later prophets, it's from the Torah itself. And there he quoted the piece from Parshat Nitzavim in Deuteronomy and from Bilam to show that the concept of a final redemption and a Messianic era is already in the Torah and comes from Moshe and Bilam. So that's the end of chapter 11 of the last two chapters of the Mishneh Torah. Now we go into, that's the first Mishnah of chapter 11. Now we're going to the second. We find further evidence in the Torah from the commandment concerning the cities of refuge, the Ari Miklat. The Torah thus says in Devarim, Deuteronomy, when God enlarges your borders, and you shall add 3 cities. So the Rambam says this never took place, but it is certain that God would not give a commandment in vain. We therefore see that this will have to take place in the Messianic era. In short, we were given 6 cities of refuge where someone who killed inadvertently could go to. There were 3 from Eretz Israel, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan, and there were another 3 on the other side of the Jordan. But in the Torah, it says that in the future, when God will expand your borders, there will be 3 more cities of refuge. And so the Rambam is pointing out, well, we never had another 3. So it's obvious it's talking about a future event when the land of Israel will expand, and that will really only happen at the time of the Mashiach. This is one idea that we're going to go back over again and see some very, very deep ideas about what are these three additional Are Miklat. Okay, now the Rambam continues. We do not have to bring any proof, however, that the prophets speak of the Mashiach, since all the writings are full of this concept. So that's a very important point, is, again, anyone who reads through the prophets, they all will talk about what are called either the end of days, the wars of Gog and Magog, the coming redemption, and what it will be like at the time of redemption, especially the idea of the ingathering of the exiles, the rebuilding of the temple, the land turning green, and a world of peace. Now, the third halacha or chapter here. Now, listen to this. This is what the Rambam says. Do not think that the Mashiach will have to perform signs and miracles. He will not necessarily change the course of nature, bring the dead back to life, or anything else like that. We thus find that Rabbi Akiva, the greatest sage of the Mishnah, was willing to accept Ben Koziba as the Mashiach, at least until he was killed because of his sins. It is only when he was killed that they realized that they had been wrong and he was not the true Mashiach. We see, however, that the sages did not ask him for any sign or miracle. Okay, this we'll explain at a later time, but Rabbi Akiva at a certain point felt that who he called Bar Chochma was the Mashiach. It's explained by many that he considered him a potential Mashiach because he had rebuilt the temple. He had not gathered all the exiles. But what Bar Chochma did, he threw off the yoke of the Romans. For 2 or 3 years, Bar Chochma chased the Romans out of Israel and reestablished the kingdom of Israel. So Rabbi Akiva saw that these were really miraculous events that were occurring. Others say that he thought he was Mashiach ben Yosef, not the final Mashiach, but he was paving the way. This will go back over. But the Rambam's point here is that Rabbi Akiva said, this is the Mashiach, and he didn't perform, as it were, miracles. He didn't raise the dead. He didn't change nature. And so the Rambam, and we're going to discuss this, the Rambam sees Mashiach coming in a very natural way, as we're going to see. The Rambam continues. The main thing, however, is that the Mashiach will not change our religion in any way. The Torah that we have now, with all its laws and commandments, will remain the same forever. Nothing will be added to, nor nothing subtracted from it. So here, again, I'm just going to make a short comment that the idea that the Torah that we have now will be the Torah forever is an established idea, but many explain that the way that we will understand the Torah, even the way we will read the Torah, the permutations of the Torah, will be as if a new Torah. And there's a verse, there's a saying in Midrash Vayikra Rabbah, Torah chadasha mi'iti tetzeh. A new Torah will come out from me, meaning from God. And so it's explained that it doesn't mean necessarily a new Torah. It's the same Torah, but we will understand it so differently, which doesn't mean that the Torah that we have now will not be in force, but our understanding of it will be so much deeper. It will be like a new Torah. But the Rambam is saying that the Mashiach is not coming to change the Torah whatsoever. The Rambam continues. We may assume, now this is very important. Now the Rambam is going to get into, we'll call it the job description of the Mashiach, more specifically. We may assume that an individual is the Mashiach if he fulfills the following conditions. He must be a ruler from the house of David, immersed in the Torah and its commandments like David, his ancestor. He must also follow both the written and the oral law, lead all Jews back to the Torah, strengthen the observance of its laws, and fight God's battles. This includes what we have discussed and will continue to discuss, the last wars, Gog and Magog, and the last wars before peace will descend upon earth. Rambam says, if one fulfills these conditions, then we may assume that he is Mashiach. Okay, he didn't do everything yet. But if he's able, as it were, to fight the wars of God, strengthen the Torah among the Jewish people, be from the house of David, then we can assume that perhaps he is Mashiach. Rambam continues, if he does this successfully, and then rebuilds the temple on its original site and gathers all the dispersed Jews, then we may be certain that he is the Mashiach. But then listen what Rambam says. He will then perfect the entire world and bring all people to serve God in unity. It has thus been predicted in Zephaniah. He's now quoting Zephaniah. I will then give all peoples a pure tongue, that they may call on the name of God, and all serve him in one manner. This is a prophecy from Zephaniah, who is saying that a time will come when God will purify the tongue, the speech of all people, that they may call in the name of God, and all will serve him in the same manner. This is part of the job description of the Mashiach. Okay, that is the end of the 11th chapter of the Laws of Kings. Now we go into the 12th chapter. Do not think that the ways of the world or the laws of nature will change in the Messianic age. This is not true. The world will continue as it is. I will just mention this is a point of differing opinions among the sages that we will get to. The Rambam was very clear in, if you go through all of this, his belief was that the Mashiach will come in a natural way, and the beginning and the unfolding of the Messianic era will be in a totally natural way. But I'm just saying right now, when we get to the end, we're going to see I wouldn't call it a contradiction in the words of Rambam, but I would call it a deeper understanding, because here he's saying nature will not change, the Mashiach won't change nature, the Torah won't change. But later, what he describes as what will occur in the Messianic era is a total change of human consciousness to the point that it's not even recognizable of our consciousness today. So that needs to be pointed out, that here he says everything will continue as it is. So he says, Rambam continues, it is true that the prophet Isaiah predicted in the 11th chapter, and he quotes Isaiah, the wolf shall live with the sheep, the leopard shall lie down with the kid. So Rambam says, this, however, is merely an allegory, meaning that the Jews will live safely even among the wicked nations. We really should say the previous wicked nations, because Rambam already said that when Mashiach comes, he'll basically bring the whole world back to the belief and service of God. So he says, but in other words, in the beginning of the Messianic era, he's saying this idea of the lion will lay down with the lamb is an allegory. And what it means is Israel will not be hounded anymore, will not be attacked anymore by the nations around it. Continue with Rambam. We thus find that the prophet says of the nations who will punish Israel, and this is from Jeremiah, a wolf from the plains shall ravish them. A leopard shall prowl in their cities. Now, again, this is not talking about real leopards or real wolves. This is talking about the nations around Israel. And so the Rambam is saying, just like Jeremiah used the wolf and the leopard in an allegorical manner, Isaiah also, when he was saying that the lion shall lay down with the wolf, with the lamb, was also talking in an allegorical manner. Rambam continues, all nations will return to the true religion and will no longer steal or oppress. They will eat that which they have honestly attained, together with Israel. This is what the prophet means when he says, and this is from Isaiah, the lion shall eat hay like the ox, excuse me. In other words, pointing out again an allegorical way that it won't be like a rat race anymore. People will not be fighting each other over land and economics and food. The lion shall eat hay like the fox. In other words, no one's on the hunt anymore. The Rambam continues, all prophecies such as these regarding the Mashiach are allegorical. Only in the Messianic age will we know the meaning of each allegory and what it comes to teach us. Now, the Rambam is about to state some very, very important ideas. Our sages provided us with an important rule when they said, there is no difference between this world and the Messianic age, except with regard to our subjection to other governments. Again, this is highly controversial, what Rambam is saying. In the Tractate of Sanhedrin, where we have the main prophecies about Mashiach, Techiyat HaMeitim, the world to come, there are many, many different opinions and traditions about the Mashiach and the Messianic era. One of them was proclaimed by Shmuel. And Shmuel said exactly what the Rambam is holding here. And that's the thing. Rambam agrees with Shmuel's opinion, but not everyone agrees with Shmuel's opinion. So, but this is the Rambam's opinion, where he says the only difference between this world and the Messianic age is that we will not be subjugated to other governments anymore. Rambam continues, from the simple meaning of a number of prophecies, we see that the Messianic age will begin with the war of Gog and Magog. Okay, we talked about that last week, but listen what Rambam says here. Here he says, the Messianic age will begin with the war of Gog and Magog. In other words, there are different opinions when the Mashiach will come. Will the Mashiach come before Gog and Magog and begin the Messianic era, and then Gog and Magog will come and try to halt it? Or the Messianic era will not really start until Gog and Magog are defeated? Different opinions, different traditions. So here Rambam says, we see that the Messianic age will begin with the war of Gog and Magog. He continues, before this war of Gog and Magog, a prophet will arise to rectify the Jews and prepare their hearts. The prophet foresaw this when he said, in God's name, in the prophet Malachi, behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the great and terrible day of God. So here he brings Elijah, but now you're going to see he brings two different versions of when Elijah comes and what his role is. Other people interpret in a certain way what the Rambam is talking about Elijah as Mashiach ben Yosef, the Mashiach from Yosef. Okay, so Rambam continues. This prophet will not come to make the clean unclean or the unclean clean. He will not declare that certain individuals are illegitimate when they have been assumed to be legitimate. Neither will he legitimize those who are assumed to be illegitimate. His only task will be to bring peace to the world. The prophecy thus concludes, he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to their children. So here the Rambam is giving over we'll call it a huge role to Elijah the prophet, a prophet that will come before Mashiach. And in a sense, he will already accomplish much of what we attribute to the Mashiach. But then Rambam says, others of our sages, however, say that Elijah will come immediately before the Messiah, after the war of Gog and Magog. So here again, the Rambam is alluding to that there's different opinions of when and how and who will fight the war of Gog and Magog. At what point of the revelation of Mashiach will this war be fought? What's interesting here is this is the only place that Rambam says others of our sages, in other words, he brings another opinion of what he first says. But what I've tried to point out that a number of things that the Rambam has said, there are other opinions. But it's interesting that here he does bring two different opinions about who Elijah the prophet will be and when he will come and what he will accomplish. Okay, we're actually getting towards the end here. In all cases, such as now, what he's going to say now is super important. In all cases such as these, no man knows what will happen until the time comes. So Rambam is admitting that there are many traditions, many ideas, many different prophecies about Mashiach. And he's saying this very simply, we simply will not know until it unfolds, until it happens, exactly how all these things will play themselves out. Rambam continues, these things were purposely left ambiguous by the prophets. Our Talmudic sages likewise did not have any clear tradition in this area and could therefore only come to some conclusion by interpreting various biblical passages. It is for this reason that we find so many opinions regarding these matters. So here the Rambam admits, even though he's giving over his opinion, and the Rambam's opinion is very important. This is one of the greatest commentators in Jewish history. But here he admits there are many different traditions, and we won't know until it comes. Now listen what he says. The main thing to remember, however, is that neither the order in which these things will occur nor their details are fundamental to our faith. A person should therefore not involve himself in analyzing these traditions. He should not spend time on the midrashim which were written about such topics, nor consider them overly important. Not everyone agrees with what the Rambam just said, but what he's trying to say is the following. He says, for those things do not bring one to love or fear God. One should likewise not attempt to calculate when the Mashiach will come. Our sages thus said, may the soul of those who calculate the end rot. In other words, there's opinion in the Gemara very opposed to coming up with all kinds of like proof. Mashiach is coming this month. Mashiach's coming in 2 years. Mashiach is coming in 5 years, whatever it is. The sages did not like this. One must hope and believe in general, as we have explained. Okay, now we're on the last 2 parts. And here, the Rambam is going to explain our desire for Mashiach and what will actually occur. Our sages and prophets did not long for the Messianic age in order that they might rule the world and dominate the Gentiles. They did not desire that the nations should honor them, or they should be able to eat, drink, and be merry. They only wanted one thing, and that was to be free to involve themselves in the Torah and its wisdom. They wanted nothing to disturb or distract them, in order that they should be able to strive to become worthy of life in the world to come. This has already been discussed in my code on repentance. Now we come to the very last idea from Rambam, where he says, and this is the closest that he's coming to describe, well, what will the Messianic era be like? Even though he's already said there are many traditions, what it will be like, how it will happen, and we shouldn't delve so deeply in them. But nonetheless, he brings his opinion. And this is what he says. In the Messianic age, there will be neither war nor famine. Jealousy and competition will cease to exist. For all good things will be most plentiful, and all sorts of delicacies will be as common as dust. The main occupation of humanity, he doesn't say of the Jewish people, he says of humanity, will only be to know God. The Jews will therefore become great sages, know many hidden things, and achieve the greatest understanding of God possible for a mortal human being. And the Rambam finishes by saying, the prophet Isaiah thus predicted, and he quotes, the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. So this is what I pointed out before. At first, Rambam seems to be saying there'll be no change in nature. The lion laying down with the lamb is an allegory. No miracles have to happen. But here, his explanation is of a world that we can't even imagine. A world without famine, a world with no war, a world with no jealousy and competition. It means that human nature has to change. He's describing a situation of a complete change in human nature. Now, you could call that natural. It will be a natural development, or you could call it miraculous. But then he also says, for all good things will be most plentiful, and all sorts of delicacies will be as common as dust. Now, again, this is talking about a world where there's so much plenty, and there's no stress, and everyone has everything that they need. Not just everything they need, they have all the delicacies in the world. Well, again, you could call this will be a natural development, but it sounds pretty miraculous. So I think maybe what the Rambam was saying is more, and many people say this, that the beginning of the Messianic era will occur naturally. It will not be full of there might be miracles in the war, and we could even call a miracle that God is going to bring Mashiach. But it will come relatively naturally. But as the Messianic era unfolds, reality as we know it is going to change fundamentally. Not just human consciousness, but just the reality of life is going to change radically, to the point that it might not be an allegory that the lamb will lie down with the lion and the leopard will lie down with the ox. But this, as the Rambam said, rightfully so, we will not know until it actually happens. So I'm very glad we went through the entire Rambam, and in the next 2 weeks, we are going to analyze many, many different traditions about Mashiach, including the whole, this is all in the context of war and peace. As Rambam says, the Mashiach will bring peace to the whole world, and there will be no more war. So that's why we're including the ideas about Mashiach in a series about war and peace. Because here we come to the culmination of world history as we know it. And this is the solution, or this is the breaking of the mold of war and peace. We're getting ready for a whole change of reality in human consciousness, and we should all be blessed to be there to see it.